Before I begin, I've asked the town board, the town attorney, to prepare some information for the audience this evening with regards to the public forum portion of the meeting. During the last several meetings, we've had instances in which the use of the public forum has not followed our civility policy. I would like our town attorney now to briefly highlight the policy.
The public forum has been a long-standing portion of our meetings to afford the general public an opportunity to speak, and it is the intent of this portion of the meeting to be used for meaningful dialogue from the public. As of late, individuals have used the public forum to make comment that can only be considered personal attacks. The town has established guidelines regarding the public forum portion of our meeting, which are outlined in the civility policy, which was adopted by the town board in January of 2010. Individuals speaking during the public forum section of the meeting shall do so, quote, shall do so in an orderly manner and shall not make personal, impertinent, slanderous, or profane remarks to any member of a public board of the town of Greece, its staff, or the general public. Any person who makes such remarks or who utters loud, threatening, personal, or abusive language or engages in other disorderly conduct which interrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of any public meeting of any public board of the town of Greece shall, at the discretion of the presiding officer or a majority of the members of such public board, be barred from further attendance before that public board during that meeting. Individuals may not engage in disorderly or boisterous conduct, including the utterance of loud, threatening, or abusive language, or other acts which disturb, disrupt, or otherwise prevent the business of government of which impeded the orderly conduct of any meeting of a public board. Furthermore, during the open forum portion of a meeting, any subject that is not deemed relevant by the presiding officer of the public board shall be concluded. The policy shall also state that the presiding officer of a public board shall have the right to terminate the open forum portion of the meeting at any time, and each person who addresses the public board shall address his remarks to the public board as a whole and not to any individual member thereof, unless in response to a question from such individual board member. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Rita Gerritsen. I live at 363 Wildwood Drive. I'm here to address the board to ask them to think about what their responsibility is in terms of the voters of this community and the opportunity for people to express themselves and share their concerns with the board. At the last meeting, Mr. Alberger chose to shut down a speaker who was communicating with this board about his displeasure with the supervisor's performance behavior. And he has the right to share his concerns with you, even if the supervisor doesn't like it. And I have to say that I'm totally disappointed in the people on this board that you do not show the backbone to stand up and represent the people who elected you. Rather, you comply with your party bosses. And in particular, when you were invited to come to meet candidates, come to a candidates night to meet the voters, people that you have been elected to represent, Andrew Conlon and Shannon O'Keefe specifically refused to participate. You should show total disrespect for your voters. You listen to the party boss rather than the people that have elected you. So I am asking you, for the next few months at least, while you're still in those chairs, to do something that you've been elected to do and represent the people who sent you there. And I would also ask you to look at that civility doctrine that the attorney just read, did you actually read that? Do you really believe that you should be able to shut down conversation in the way that that describes? You all voted for it unanimously. You should be ashamed of yourselves. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone else care to address the board?
Repeat. Sir. Joe Camiolo, 4470 Creighton Lane, that is in the town. Each of these meetings, we start out about the same. And what I'd like to say is something that if you look at what Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Let's take and do business at the town meetings. I ask all of you to stay instead of just start your rhetoric at the beginning of the meeting, because you can put input. The town board has been totally receptive to that, and I make that offer to everybody here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Wendy Wright, and I'm live at 172 North Autumn. And I'm really happy to see the Boy Scouts here to see our government in action. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for what you did for Mr. Casey. He was a wonderful man and one of my neighbors, and I really appreciate you doing that. Also, I'd like to just encourage you to take a look at the way that you handle people that are trying to say things, no matter what they're saying, and pay attention to what they're saying. As a professor of public administration for many years, I really think that this is democracy. I mean, the local government is democracy at its highest form, and I hope we all can really realize that. Thank you.
Anyone else care to address the board?
I'm Dave Garrettson. I live at 363 Wildwood Drive. I'm the town leader of the Greece Democratic Party. Let me add a word to what Wendy Wright just said. I was very pleased this evening to hear the board memorialize and recognize the contribution of Bill Casey. Bill Casey was a Democrat. He was a member of our committee, and he was a wonderful person. Those of you who had the pleasure of knowing him know what I'm talking about. Over the summer, I had a conversation with Bill on the phone. He was ill. He was no longer able to go out and do the activities had to do with getting our folks elected. And he mentioned to me how severely disappointed he was in the direction of town government, and particularly this body. You know, Bill said, you know, I thought I'd seen it all, and every time I think I've seen it all, they do something else that has me shaking my head. If Bill had lived another week, he would have seen yet something else that he had never seen before. This body telling a citizen, shut up and sit down. Is this America? This is how we do things in Greece? You know, we have a civility policy that tells us that we don't need to listen to voters. That's how we want to do things in Greece? I don't think so. And then, if Bill had seen that, and he thought he had seen it all, then he would have lived to have seen something even more remarkable, which was 1 week ago, when two of the incumbents who are sitting up here disrespected the voters they represent by not showing up to answer their questions in the community forum. Why was it that you didn't show up? Because your political boss, Bill O'Reilly, told you to stay away. Is this what we should expect of you, that you're going to have more allegiance to your political boss than to the voters? That you're going to sit in silence and have more allegiance to John Allberger as he tells voters to sit down and be out of order and no longer speak? You're going to have more allegiance to that than to the citizens and the voters? If you ask me, the motto of this body ought to be, don't ask us, don't tell us. You know, don't ask us questions we don't want to answer. And if you come and try to tell us anything at the town board meeting, we're not listening. And with all due respect to the speaker, who was a couple folks before me, I'm glad that this body has been receptive to your thoughts and your ideas. They have not been receptive to mine, and I've seen too many other people who've been disrespected at this podium. Thank you.
I live at 98 El Rancho Drive, and I wanted to tell the board a little story. I've lived in Greece now just over 7 years, and when we came here first, I was very interested about how the town got its name, partly because I am of Greek heritage, but also because I'm a historian and an educator. So I looked into it. And it turns out that the town was named Greece in the 1820s in celebration of independence of Greece from the Ottoman Empire and the return of democracy to the birth of democracy, to the birthplace of democracy. So I said, this could be a good place. Recently, I've been supremely disappointed. I don't see democracy happening here, particularly in this body. The disrespect that is shown for voters and for their opinions is totally at odds with the notions of American democracy. And the things that we've seen go on of late, particularly with the abuse of this public forum, you said that this is supposed to be a dialogue. I don't hear anybody here responding ever. A dialogue needs two sides. When will you answer anything that is said here, other than to tell people to shut up and sit down? This is not what democracy is supposed to be. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that in the years that I've lived here, I have never seen my town board representative, heard from him, seen any evidence of him inquiring of voters what they think. All I've seen him do is follow the leader. Can't think for yourself? Is that the problem? Or don't you have the courage to? It's time that this board started to actually talk with the people of this town. And get out of your comfort zone and not just talk to the same people over and over again. It strikes me as very strange, some of the decisions that have been made. I see there's an item for a vocational school to be approved on the agenda, yet Bryant and Stratton was not approved. Why? Because the wrong kind of people would show up. Totally racist decision. And you should be ashamed of yourselves. There was no reason to deny that application except for racism. Period. The entire basis of that. When I hear somebody say that they were happy with that decision because they didn't want to see them, hear them, or smell them, I know where that's coming from. And each one of you just went along with that kind of disgusting, racist attitude. And you have nothing to say. It's about time you said something, folks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charlie Ennis. I'm a retired senior citizen. I live down at 1022 Rumson Road here in the town of Greece. I hope each of you had your copy to try to make available to everyone of our Constitution of our nation this evening, which is relevant to the business of the town of Greece, I believe, and the business of the board of all towns across our nation. I had a recent communication with the town attorney, Mr. Raymond Durati, cordial conversation a week or two ago. We talked about Article 12, I believe Chapter 12 of the Town Code, which deals with town ethics, morality, if you will, in government, conflict of interest, things of this nature. The board, which he is a member of, I believe it's a 3-person board, I would like to urge the town board to revisit Article 12, Chapter 12, if you will, and perhaps rewrite it, look at it again, perhaps expand it. Instead of just meeting the state minimum requirement in that regard, perhaps going a few steps further, expanding the board, perhaps to 5 or 7 members, reaching perhaps out to the community for board members of a new committee after revisiting the article and code, making for more transparency and democracy perhaps in the functioning of that committee, more proactivity, I believe. Instead of being dormant and just meeting the bare state minimum, enhance it and show the people, the citizens of Greece, that yes, you do care about ethics and morality and conflict of interest, more transparency in government, and making a fuller committee, publicizing more to the community. Hey, even the committee could hold its own news conference, and Mr. DeRadio could lead the parade. That would be a wonderful thing to see. Bringing more, perhaps, accountability and perhaps transparency to the town government of the town of Greece. Therefore, the reputation of the town, I think, would be enhanced if we had a proactive committee of that nature, looking at the ethics and morality of the town officials. And if something came to light, instead of meeting on expand the meetings, let's say 3 or 4 a year, instead of having just the state requirement, I guess it was 1 year, and then as needed basis, well, perhaps more activity in that regard, in light of recent events here with the town government, obviously, would be to the betterment of the community and the citizens at large. And I would strongly urge the town board to follow that example. And of course, my opinion about past occurrences that are related to the town government and to the leader of the town government, my opinion stands in that regard. And I would reiterate a call for, obviously, the leader of our town to do the right and proper thing. Thank you very much.
Caterino, I think everybody knows me and where I live and where to get me. Since I was one of the people involved in the event last month, I'd like to state publicly that given the statement of rules by your town attorney, I can't see in any way, shape, or form how I violated them. Yet, Supervisor Auger cut me off and adjourned the meeting. So I'd like, A, a public apology from the supervisor, and B, since the rules cut both ways, I'd like to see a motion of censure for his actions of disrespect towards me and the public. Second, I'd like to make a brief comment about the rules themselves. There's something called public forum doctrine, which some of you may be familiar with. And that's sort of a general idea of how we can formulate rules about the public forums. And that seems to say that you can put restrictions on the public forum, but they have to be relevant. They have to be germane to the issue that you're talking about. Now, when you say that the supervisor has complete discretion to decide what's relevant and what's not, that's certainly a vast overextension of the sense of public forum doctrine. That's just not reasonable. I ran some of this stuff by the Open Meeting Committee, and they seem to tell me that there's nothing that would allow the supervisor to have that kind of discretion over topics to be raised. That's not a reasonable restriction, and many of your restrictions seem to me to be unreasonable. And finally, since many of the criticisms that are raised concern the supervisor, it's hard to see why or how he should have discretion to decide what topics or what comments are germane or not germane. As you know, and I'm sure Mr. Dorado knows, the ultimate authority lies with the town board and not with the supervisor himself. And in that regard, I'd like to ask the town board members why they aren't accountable for this. Again, as many speakers have pointed out, you just sit there, you go along with things, you never criticize, you never raise any points. Well, what's your role in formulating these overly restrictive limits on the public forum? They go way beyond what's fair, germane, or reasonable. A reasonable restriction that would have some reasonable purpose for the governing of the meeting. The supervisor's complete discretion over topics is simply ludicrous, and that would never stand up as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.